But I think, although we're talking about very different cultures and very different manifestation of cultural identity, I think the one thing that stood out for me, the one unifying thing, was the relationship to the land. In each of the projects you described, the land on which you were building is incredibly important, and its history, its use, and then what you can derive for the architecture from that land. But the difference then starts to become quite interesting, I think, because in the case of Islam, it's very much rooted in a place. It's very much rooted in the Arabian Peninsula, and obviously Mecca and Medina are the centers of the religion, but it is a religion with a universal message that's spread across the world. African-American culture, I think, is another very interesting thing that originates in West Africa, as I understand it, but is becoming increasingly recognized as having a global significance. Now, what Bhutan is doing in transforming, as I was saying earlier, from a feudal absolute monarchy to a modern outward-looking nation around the concept of gross national happiness is also, I think, trying to derive something from its earth, its soil, its topography, its culture, its craft, into something that would have more broader significance than just a small landlocked country of 700,000 people. And Henry, I think what you and Scott are talking about is also, talking about New Zealand, a country that, until perhaps, 50, 60 years ago, thought it was basically an extension of England on the southern hemisphere, but has begun to realize it's actually something really quite different, and that the indigenous cultures are very much part of it, and indeed probably a stronger part than the European, what has been brought in by European settlement. And I wonder if each of you could say just a few words about the relationship to the land and how that has become the core for developing something that has a broader implication than just the sites you're building on.
I think the culture issue, as they said, and what are the different factors which impact or kind of shape this culture into place, and how it get impacted by many, many different factors of life of the people who live there over hundreds and thousands of years, and how this could be extracted from a good understanding of what's happening there to be reflected in the projects and drive our form and shape and experience of the people will drive or will experience this building is quite interesting. What we found is a bit more challenging in Medina case, that this city had been built and known all over the world by today 2 billion different Muslims around the world, and all of them are visiting or hoping to visit the city at one stage of their life, that they themselves, by actually visiting the Medina, becoming a part of this, driving the culture and creating the culture and shaping it in real terms. And over the last 1,500 years, then this had been, or 1,400 plus years, then since this had started, the Medina became some sort of a melting pot of all those people coming from so many different backgrounds. It's different than any other place of the other projects where the culture had been rooted in this particular place, grow with the time, and actually creating deep roots into this place. But in this case, people coming from all over the world, and they are impacting this culture. They come for this visit, they come to trade, to exhibit their products, to actually kind of get impacted by the other people, the other communities, and impact them at the same time. Then it was a challenge for us to try to understand how we can reflect that. It's not only one city. Of course, we found a lot of kind of inspiration from the local architectural, the old Islamic architecture in this part of the world, but how all those other factors had impacted it had been quite challenging for us as well.
I would add, and to piggyback off my colleagues at Pinnacle and their project, and to speak about it in an American context, in your question, the land for us as a practice is sacred, and it critiques the discussion in sort of American urbanity, which simply looks at renting out a piece of building that was there on a site and putting another amenity there.
Which goes back to Thomas Jefferson.
Which gets back to Thomas Jefferson,
Yeah.
no doubt. I think for us as a practice, we're looking at what perhaps someone might call mundane, whether it's a porch of where someone lived, a bus stop of where they stopped, the curb cut, and we're challenging that. And to say it's sacred, a bit different from you, but sacred in the fact that it has memories, it has collections of years of being used. I like the idea of urbanistically that the land is sacred, and we sort of slow down and pay attention to what was there before we start to make. It allows it to be accessible, and it allows it to speak to a larger demographic versus just getting the highest and best use and moving on. I would also add, from an African American culture, spirituality is deep for us. And the idea of pausing and saying, this is where I was raised, this is where I went to church, this is where I got married. These things are important and should be thought about in the way you think about setting cities. Our culture, and I'm glad you say it, is going all around the world, and so therefore we are challenging folks to say, slow down and understand where you're working in terms of context.
Yeah, I mean, I can back that right up. I mean, I think that's our practice now is about designing a process before we design a project, and figuring out who we're going to work with and how we're going to work and what the values are and what the landscape can tell us in terms of it. It has values, it has stories to tell, it holds information, and I think we find that before we draw now we need to understand all of those kind of things, and designing a process before we design a project and investing the time up front to really understand the people that we're working with and for. It's really critical.
I think in the case of our project for the airport in Kelefu, when we speak about the land and the landscape, I think our goal was that the project had to kind of reflect the same ideals that we've tried to design the master plan of Kelefu around, meaning that development, kind of trying to reject the idea that development should automatically displace nature, and instead trying to find ways where you don't have to choose either or, but development can follow natural patterns, so to speak. So that's why the urban grid of the mindfulness city is formed by the flow of the river. That's why the wildlife corridors sort of pass through the city seamlessly, weaving as much as is possible fauna and people flow together. It also means we have to overcome some challenges in the airport of how to keep the elephants out of the runway without actually blocking their natural migration patterns. That sort of provides us with some interesting design challenges to overcome. But I think the airport tries to really kind of lean into that goal from the master plan, that nature should not be displaced. It should be allowed to continue to thrive as much as is possible around the development areas, and that's what we've tried to do for the airport. The current site is almost a jungle today, and we try to keep as much of that character on site as possible. So when you arrive, your first experience of Bhutan, if you are landing for the first time in Bhutan, in Kelefu, will be that of the majestic nature, and not, as you could see some other places, a sea of asphalt and concrete. So this is really what we've tried to work towards.
Good. Well, thank you very much. I'm afraid we could go on, but we don't have time. So could we thank our speakers on their projects about cultural identity, and then meet here again at 12:05 when we'll be talking about climate, energy, and carbon.